I can honestly say that I am genuinely thankful for every single one of you. Now, when we're in a crowd and I'm standing in front of you, you don't expect a whole lot of feedback, and most of you assume I'm not talking to you. It's kind of, you do that in a crowd. But if I was to greet you as you're coming in today with thank you, instead of good morning, hey, how's it going? Good to see you again. Where were you last week? Or something else that was on my mind. If I was to say thank you, I know without a doubt that for 99% of you, the immediate thought, the first thing in your mind is just simply two words. And it would be natural, it would seem harmless, it would seem even helpful and a little bit encouraging, but your immediate response would be those two words that don't seem to be a big deal at all, but yet those two words have the power to destroy gratitude. And the two words are simply, for what? For what? Why would you thank me? What did I do to earn that? What did I do to deserve that? What did I do for you? What would prompt you to say thank you? Because just to say thank you doesn't make any sense unless there is an obvious reason for that. So why would you do that? So gratitude is fine, but gratitude needs to have some sort of reason, and you would assume that you've done something for me, therefore I say thank you to you, and I'm grateful to you, and it all makes sense. But the truth is that there are times when our faith journeys reflect how we feel with each other, relationally, physically, mentally, all that as well. So when we go to God and we think about thanking God, we immediately think that we are thanking Him for something that He has done. There is a thing. We're saying, God, I am grateful to you because you paid that bill, you healed that disease, you put me in a better spot, you provided a new job, you provided a new friend, you gave me that gift. There is a thing that you've given me, therefore I am grateful. And for some of us, maybe you even take it a step further and you go beyond what normal people would be grateful for. And you've gotten to the point where you're saying, God, thank you for another day to live. Thank you for a heart that beats. Thank you for lungs that allow me to breathe. Thank you for a mind that allows me to process and think. Thank you for eyes that see and a mouth that can speak. Thank you for all of these things. And those things are great. But for all of you, whether you realize it or not, there is going to come a time when this flood of gifts that you have for which you are thankful, that flood seems to dry up. And there are moments in your faith journey where that prayer request is not being answered and the sickness is not going away and the friends are nowhere to be found, and God is not providing that new job, and He is not paying that bill. And believe it or not, all those small things that most people take for granted, for which maybe you were digging deep and really being grateful before, a mind that works and eyes that see and mouths that can speak well and a heart that beats and lungs, there's going to come a time when even those things don't work as well. Now, you teenagers have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's okay. But in about 10 or so years, all of a sudden you're like, is my heart supposed to feel that way? Like, what was that about? And why can't I remember why I'm in here? And then you're 30 years old and you're just standing in your living room like, what am I doing? I don't even know what's going on right now. And then when you're 40 and you run up the stairs for something, you get to the top and you breathe a little heavy, like, I got winded up my stairs? Like, what is really going on here? And then your reading glasses are a necessity, and then you're not hearing the way, everything begins to fall apart. And when you were younger, you would say, God, I believe, help me to see better. And then you miraculously would. Or God, help me to have some clarity of thought. And the truth was, you weren't really struggling, you were just not focused. And then you get older, you just pray and pray and pray, and God says, put your bifocals on and let's read some truth together. And things begin to fall apart. And you find yourself physically or emotionally or relationally broken, and nothing is changing. But if you've spent your entire life having this sense of my gratitude to God is connected to the gifts that He gives, then when the gifts are no more, it's hard to be grateful. it's at that point where we realize, what do I do here? I mean, it's Thanksgiving. I'm supposed to be really thankful. I'm looking around, and maybe for the first time in a long time, I don't have as many friends that I'm celebrating with as I used to, or there are people that I love that are no longer here, or I'm financially at a very different place this Thanksgiving than another time, or I'm emotionally at a different spot, or I'm just a little bit off. And in those moments, gratitude is harder to come by because most of the time we've connected the idea of gratitude to gifts and to what we have. And we've been grateful to God and we've thanked God for what he has done for us. Now, there is a book in the Bible that we don't consider to be the first because it's not in order, but it's perhaps the oldest book that was actually recorded, and it's a book called Job. And if you thought it was pronounced Job, that's okay. Don't be down on yourself. It happens to the best of us. But it's actually, at least in English, we pronounce it as Job. And Job was perhaps the first book that actually was recorded. Now, Genesis talks about things that happened first, but it seems that Moses put those first 5 books together for the most part, and Job most likely lived before Moses' time. So we've got this old book called Job. And even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're familiar with the story of Job. His story is transcendent. People know it. People understand it. In fact, right now, many of you might not even know anything else in the Bible, but the fact that I mentioned it, and it's most likely going to be a focus for us today, made you roll your eyes and think, you got to be kidding me. This is one of those, I'm trying to be thankful. I'm working it up. You don't know how hard I worked to just get here today and put a smile on, and now we're going to bring everything down. Because we know the story. We understand Job. Even if we don't know all of the details, we know that Job was a man who had a lot of stuff. He had a lot of people around him. He had a ton of respect. He was an authority figure in his community, and I don't really know exactly what community was for them at that time. It certainly wasn't a big, bright city like we live in, but there was a sense of community around him, and he was known, well known. Large family, had everything. And then all of a sudden, it was gone. His land was gone, his possessions were gone, his health was gone, his wealth was gone, and eventually his family was taken as well. And so there are some people that come by his house to have a conversation about what's going on. And when I was a kid, when I read through the Bible, and the Bible has all those little headers at the top that help you understand what you're about to read. They were added in, of course, by people who translated scripture. And it talks about Job's friends. And then as I grew up, I realized those were not friends. Those were just people in the community. And now that I'm older, I'm reading back, there were not even good people in the community. Those were the worst people in the community. And they showed up to his house. And for the first time, they were standing above him. They were the ones with stuff, and he was the one without. They were the ones with maybe the respect of those around him. He was the one without. And they came around and began to talk to him / at him and said, Job, what has gone on? What have you done? You know you've got some sort of secret sin that you're not telling us about. You're not telling people about because God would not do this to you if you had not done something wrong. He's punishing you. So he's listening, and he's listening, and he's listening to them. He is unaware, as they're unaware, that it had nothing to do with his sins. He did nothing wrong. In fact, Job was so confident as you read through the story that there are moments where he's talking to God and he says, Creator, find the fault in me. Now, most of us, even those who feel like we're good people, we still might not have the confidence and courage to look up to heaven and pray and say, God, find a fault in me. Like, go ahead and try. I mean, that's boldness. And he said, I don't know. I've laid everything out. There's nothing in me that is secretly running from you. There's not a thing I'm hiding. There's not an issue, a struggle, a relationship. I am with you. So as he's struggling through all of this, his friends are speaking with him. And what they don't know is what we later found out, that behind the scenes, God actually got this thing going. He was bragging on Job. He said, that right there is a man. That's my man. He's a grateful, faithful man. And I don't know how it all unfolded, but the enemy spoke back to God. Satan said, the only reason he is grateful is because of all the gifts you've given him. If you'd stop blessing him, he wouldn't be such a blessing to you anymore. And God said, that's not true. You don't know his heart, and I do. And that man is grateful regardless of the gifts. The enemy said, no, let me get at him. And God said, fine, you can take away any of the gifts that I've given him. Take away his health, take away his wealth, take away his possessions, take away his reputation, take away the respect, take away all of that stuff. And I'm telling you, he's going to continue to be a grateful and faithful follower of mine. So the enemy said, okay, and he began to little by little take those things away from Job. And so as we read through it, we read through him losing his family, his kids dying in this crazy tragedy. It's an awful, awful story. His wife even tells him, why don't you just look to heaven, cuss God, and die? Let it be over with. You know he's mad at you. You know this is because of something you've done. Just get it over with. All this is going on, and then we get to Job chapter 19. And if you have a Bible, open it up to the book of Job chapter 19. If you're in a table of contents, just look for Job 19, the 19th Job, and you'll find it right there. And as we get to the beginning of the chapter, Job actually speaks to his friends and says, you are killing me with words. That's what he tells them. The phrase is, you're killing me with words. How many husbands, you're killing me with words. And maybe all of you are feeling that now looking at me. You're killing me with words. Just stop talking. But that's what he said to his friends. And then in verse 7, we read where he's not arguing any point really, other than just saying, let me tell you how I feel, because this is between God and me, speaking to those men that came to his place. In verse 7, he says, though I cry violence, I get no response. Though I call for help, there is no justice. God has blocked my way so I cannot pass. He has shrouded my paths in darkness. He has stripped me of my honor and removed the crown from my head. He tears me down on every side till I am gone. He uproots my hope like a tree. Things are so bad, he accused God of uprooting the hope that he had. He goes on and says, his anger, talking about God, his anger burns against me. He counts me among his enemies. His troops advance in force. They build a siege ramp against me and encamp around my tent. He has alienated my family from me. My acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have gone away. My closest friends have forgotten me. My guests and my female servants count me a foreigner. They look on me as a stranger. I summon my servant, but he does not answer, though I beg him with my own mouth. And then my favorite verse, my breath is offensive to my wife. Now, we'll just pause for a moment. When you're living at a time where toothbrushes have not been invented and there is no mouthwash, there is no way. Like, we look back and we see pictures, and when I was a kid, the Bible pictures, Adam was a handsome, ripped, jacked dude. Eve was beautiful in all the pictures. And then you start to think, wait a minute. There are no razors, there's no toothbrushes, there are no brushes, I'm glad I didn't live. It's an ugly, ugly place to live. And with all of that, you still have him saying, I'm so bad, my wife is telling me my breath stinks. And we are 55 years old and we've never brushed our teeth. And yet somehow it is over the top. So he is so depressed and they can't even be near each other because his breath is bad. He says, I'm loathsome to my own family. Even the little boys scorn me. When I appear, they ridicule me. All my intimate friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. I am nothing but skin and bones. I have escaped only by the skin of my teeth. Have pity on me, my friends, have pity, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you pursue me as God does? Will you never get enough of my flesh? Oh, that my words were recorded. Little did he know that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock forever. Thanksgiving at Job's house would have been a piece of work. Like that he is at that point of saying, I have nothing in my hands for which I can look up to heaven and say thank you. I have nothing to say thank you for. Nothing to say I'm grateful for this. It's all gone. I have no relationship with my wife. My kids are gone. I have no health. I have no wealth. I have no reputation. I have no respect. I have absolutely nothing. And besides that, my breath is rank. Like I have zero going on for me. But yet he gets to this powerful verse and he says, but I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. How does Job maintain a grateful and faithful heart? How can he have a sense of gratitude when he has nothing for which he can be thankful? What Job figured out was, even if I don't have anything to be thankful for, I will choose to be thankful for you. Even if I have not a thing in my life to be thankful for, I will choose to be thankful for you. He says, I've got nothing. This is gone, that is gone, this is gone, that is gone. I dreamed of that, that hope is gone. God has literally uprooted the hope that I had in my life. He says, but I do know this. My Redeemer lives. And after this body has finished the decaying process that is apparently already in full gear, when it's all gone, I'll see him. And he says, that is what drives me. That is why my heart and soul burn, because I want him. Even if I have nothing from him, I want him. He is the key. He is the reason, not anything that I have. Years later, a man named Moses would figure this out. He was leading his people. And he was leading his people to focus on God, but they were focusing on themselves. He was God's leader. He was a spiritual leader and shepherd for a group of people who refused to follow very well. And so he went to God once they got into a lot of trouble and said, God, I need you. I need you. I need you. These people are difficult to lead. These people will not listen. These people will not follow. I've pointed them towards you and they're not doing it. And I know you're going to bring judgment and punishment on them, but I don't want you to. I want you to give them some grace. They need you. They need patience here. And God told Moses, because you've asked of this and because you know me, I'll do what you asked me to do. But then you can look back later at this. At Exodus chapter 33 is the story. Then he says, okay, well, but show me your glory. In other words, here's what I want you to do. God said, I'll give it to you. I'll give you my hand of blessing. He said, well, great. All right, forget that stuff. Now I want to know your heart. I want to know you. Because as much as I want this stuff, more than that, I want to know you. Years after Moses, a man named David, who would become king of Israel eventually, he wrote songs of thankfulness, and many of them talk about things for which he's truly thankful. It's a good thing to, as we call them, count your blessings. We even spent time last week as we began this series of gratitude, looking at a time in which Jesus performed a healing, and only one of them came back to say thank you for the thing that God had done in their lives. As a result of that gratitude, Jesus gave him more healing. So we know counting the blessings is a good thing. And many of the songs that are written in Scripture are about, this is what you've done for me, therefore I will give you thanks. But in Psalm chapter 7, verse 17, he says, I will give thanks to the Lord, not because of anything he's done, but because of his righteousness. One of his characteristics, his character traits. Because of who he is, not just what he's done. David figured that out. Prophets would figure that out later. Many of them would, but one I want to point out is a man named Habakkuk. Habakkuk was talking to God on behalf of the people. He was praying for the people that he was ministering to. He said, God, we're about to get squashed. We've got enemies all around us who are threatening us. We're going to be physically, in a military sense, overtaken by these people if you do not help us. And throughout the book, he refers back to what he had heard. He said, God, we've heard of things you've done. We've heard incredible stories of how you parted the sea and how you performed miracles. We've heard all of that, but we haven't seen it with our own eyes. We'd like to see one of those miracles. In other words, my neighbor sees miracles all the time. You heal people across the street. You heal people down the road. What about us? What about us? So he's asking God to do that thing, but then we have this incredible testimony in Habakkuk chapter 3 where he says, "But though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stall," in other words, my hands are empty, we got nothing, "yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior." He says, we need this so much. We need your hand of blessing. But even if you don't give us anything, we are going to find joy in your heart. In other words, we can be grateful not just because of the things you do, but because of who you are, and who you are doesn't change. And I bring all of this up because when you and I only thank God for things he does for us, we even make that part of worship about ourselves. We bow in prayer, or we go to our hiding place, whatever it is. We start talking to God, and what we're doing is looking around the rooms of our lives. God, thank you for this. Thank you for that. Thank you for him. Thank you for her. Thank you for that. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for that invitation and that opportunity and that offer and that this and that. All this stuff. And our prayers of thanksgiving end when we've exhausted all the things that God has done for us. But when we look around and can't seem to find a whole lot of things to be thankful for, things in our hands, it just goes away. And what that means is your relationship with God really becomes about gifts. And you know him according to his gifts. I thought about that this week as really, it's my mailman. He said, "What's his name?" I have no idea, and that's the point. I do not know. Every week of my life, 6 days a week, there has been a mailman or mail woman bringing me stuff. I do not know anything about them other than they give me something every day. Like, that's just kind of the relationship. And truthfully, I don't really want to know them. I'm just being frank. If you're watching online, now you're my mailman, I'm sorry. I just don't. In fact, there are times when I see you and I wait till you leave before I walk outside. Does anyone else need to confess with that? Like, you're going to walk out to the mail and you see him coming. I go, "Whoop, never mind." You go back inside because you don't want to know the mailman or mailwoman. You're like, "Just do your thing." Our relationship is based on what's in that box every time I go out there. And every day you do something for me, and that's how I know you. And as far as I know, you're just mailman, mailwoman. I don't know the story behind you. During the first service, 2 people stopped me, told me the name of their mailman and what. Okay, it's not all of us. We're not all terrible, just me and a few of you. But we don't know. And for some of you, I fear that's your relationship with God. He's just a gift giver. And you know him more by the gifts than you do by the heart of the giver. And when he doesn't give you the gift you wanted, or doesn't give you a gift in the time that you want it, you don't really know anything beyond that. And the relationship ends and you get a little frustrated. And because, have you ever gone out to the mailbox, there's nothing there, and you realize he hasn't been there yet? You're like, how dare he? It's 4:30. Like, what are you doing with your life? Like, I've been waiting all day long, and yet you're going to come late? Like, what is our relationship about? Well, apparently it's about the gift. There is no relationship. And if your understanding of God is just what he has done for you, you're missing on the good stuff. I'm telling you. I'm not saying you don't have a relationship with him. That's between you and God. But I'm telling you, if all you know about him are the things that he has done for you, you're missing on the best part of knowing God and knowing his heart. You're missing out on having a relationship that's built on the giver instead of the gifts. How many of you who have lost a parent, a mom or a dad, would give anything and give all the gifts they ever gave you back in order to spend more time with them? All the stuff, all the things they offered, all the allowances, all the gaming stations, or depending on how old you are, the Air Jordans and parachute pants, I'll give away all that stuff. Just take it all back just to have you back in my life. Because it's never really about the gift when it comes to someone you know and love. It's about the giver. And I know my time will come sooner than I realize, and my family will gather around, and I've already told them on my tombstone I want to say, "Well, he tried." Like, that's what I really want to, that's my phrase. So when you guys go by down the road, put your flowers on my little, "Well, he tried." Like that's really me. Well, when they gather around, though, I hope and pray my kids and my wife are not saying, do you remember that one vacation? Do you remember that the way he grilled burgers? Do you remember the time that we had that really good Christmas morning? Do you remember that all the oil changes and the yard mowing? Yeah, I'm happy to do that for my family. But I hope they just stop and say, man, he loved Jesus so hard. He was so consistent with us. He was so faithful. He was patient. He was kind, he was good, and I'm making up things about me now that aren't even true, but that's what I want it to be, because that's what matters. And if I only know, well, God's the one that wakes me up, and God's the one that helps my heart to beat, God's the one that allows me to see, God's the one that gives me friends, God's the one that gives me the church family, God, that's all great. But when the gifts dry up, I don't want my faith to dry up. And I don't want to struggle to be grateful. I don't want to struggle with gratitude when physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, spiritually, I'm not really at a great place, because all of us are going to be there at some point in our lives. Hard places, dark places, lonely places, cold places. And in those moments, we can still have a heart of gratitude if we've understood that it's much more valuable to chase after God's heart than it is to chase after his hand. But once you get to the heart, then everything in the hand makes sense. And there are days when there's not a whole lot coming back, but that's okay, because the heart doesn't change. But it's impossible to have that grateful heart if you've never met the one who gives the gifts. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, if you're a teenager, a young person, or maybe you've been faking church life for 30 or 40 years, if you've never stepped across the bridge that God built for you to come home, I hope that this will be your time. And all you got to do is call out and say, God, I have admittedly enjoyed your gifts for years and years, but I've never gotten to know you, the giver, and this is my time. I want to come home. And God's never going to keep you away. He's always going to welcome you in. And because of what his son did, you're able to have that relationship with him. And so I want to invite you to know Jesus today. If you're already a follower of Jesus and your life is built on stuff he's done for you, I'm telling you, you can still be secure in your relationship with God, but you are not understanding what it's truly to live an abundant life with him. I encourage you, as your friend, as pastor for many of you, stop chasing after his hand of blessing and chase after his heart. And that's where you'll find gratitude. Let's pray together.